right, so while Jonathan gets the agenda up, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Boston Region MPO's UPWP committee meeting, March 4th, 21. I'll get started by reading the accessibility statement here. So this meeting is being recorded. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, you can contact Matt Archer, MPO staff, at marcher@ctps.org or at 857-702-3704. Thank you. So I'm Ben Muller with MassDOT Planning, representing MassDOT here. And I'll start with a roll call. Let's see. MAPC. Town of Arlington.
This is Daniel Anstutz. I'm here.
Thank you. BPDA. BTD.
Tom Katz is here.
Thank you. City of Framingham.
They are not coming today.
Town of Medway. City of Newton.
Good morning, David Kosa is here.
David. Town of Norwood.
Hi, Tom O'Rourke, Town of Norwood.
Thank you. City of Somerville.
Good morning, Tom Bent, City of Somerville.
Thank you, Tom. RTAC.
Leonard Diggins, RTAC here. Having some technical problems. I'll rename myself soon, Sandy.
All right, and I think that's everyone on the list here. Sound right, Sandy?
Did we get Steve Olenoff and Tom O'Rourke?
Yes, we got Tom O'Rourke.
Okay.
Steve Olenoff here, check alternate.
Thank you.
And I see Darlene Nguyen is here, and she's an MPO board member, but not on the committee, from Beverly.
Welcome, Darlene. All right. So I think we'll kick off to the next agenda item here, agenda item number 2, public comment. Are there any members of the public who'd like to comment before the UPWP committee? Seeing and hearing none. If you have written comments, you can provide a copy to staff, to Sandy Johnston at sjohnston@ctps.org. Right, so move on to agenda item 3. So this is the summary of the February 4th, 21 meeting. Can I get a motion and a second to approve the notes as presented? Steve Olenoff?
Well, I'm not making a motion. I just wanted to point out that my name was left off the attendance list.
Oh, great. We'll get that fixed.
I'll make a motion. Tom Katz is.
Tom Bent, seconds.
Great, thank you. So I'm assuming that motion is to approve these amended to include Steve Olenoff?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So I'll do a vote here. MassDOT, yes. Daniel Anstutz?
Yes.
Tom Katzis?
Yes.
David Kozis?
Yes.
Tom O'Rourke?
Yes.
Right. Tom Bent?
Yes.
Lynn Diggins?
Yes.
Great, thank you. So we'll move on to agenda item number 4, new amendment and modification procedures. Sandy.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I think we have up on the screen in front here a attachment that's also posted on the meeting calendar. I'm just going to throw the link in the chat as well for anybody who hasn't seen it. And basically, as committee members know, there are certain procedures that we have to go through if we want to change or amend anything in the UPWP. Before last year, what would trigger a formal amendment, which needs to go through a public review process before it's approved by the MPO and FHWA, was pretty much undefined in federal government, federal guidance, excuse me. As of last year, they implemented a threshold of 10% of any, a 10% modification of any task budget would trigger a formal amendment. This year they've changed it and it's now going to be 25%. They've also simplified the guidance in other ways. You can see the old language on the left-hand column there and the proposed new language on the right. What staff are asking today is just to get your feedback on this, make sure you're okay with it. We don't need to take a formal vote because this will be written into the UPWP, specifically Chapter 2, and we can just consider the vote to approve that document as approval of these procedures as well. I think, other folks may have things they want to highlight, but the important thing from my perspective is that going forward, the threshold for triggering an amendment to the UPWP would be a modification of 25% or more in any task budget. So I'm happy to take questions or just gain the committee's informal approval that this is how you're okay doing things going forward.
All right, thank you, Sandy. And I'll add a little additional background. Historically, the UPWP amendment process has been sort of between the MPO and MassDOT. And then sort of at the conclusion of that process, we'll provide our federal partners with an updated document. Last year was sort of the first year that they wanted sort of a more rigorous process that's closer to how a TIP amendment works, where they review it in great detail, and then they have to approve it before we can execute that amendment. I think they weren't quite anticipating the volume of amendments that occur sort of statewide. So this sort of loosens that restriction, so it's a little less paperwork and we can focus on the more important changes to the work program. So I'll open the floor to any questions or comments. I see Steve Olenoff. You're muted, Steve.
Okay, I clicked on it, but it didn't work. So it says a 21-day, whenever anything goes out for an amendment, there's a 21-day comment period. Over the last number of years, we've had a lot of discussions on this, as I hope everyone recalls. And I kind of thought it was that certain important things, like doing the TIP, because of the schedule, the confined schedule of MassDOT, we'd go to a 21, but we'd leave it 30 days for everything else. So what's the case here? Should this be a 30-day comment, or why would it be a 21 only?
Yeah, so if you recall, we did 3 UPWP amendments last year, and I think for at least 2 of them, we did do a 21-day public comment period because we needed to speed it up, and because it's rare that we receive any public comments on the UPWP amendments. And I believe, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong about this, but I believe the committee discussed that at the time and indicated its general support to moving to a 21-day public comment period for the UPWP amendments and to match the TIP ones. Staff are working on a new public participation plan this year, and the intent is to propose changing 30 days to 21 days for UPWP amendments in that document. So currently the way we have it in the language here would match what's being proposed in the new public participation plan.
Yeah, I mean, there was an awful lot of discussion about the fact that 30 days was needed for a lot of organizations that meet monthly to get it out. And am I correct that you could put 30, but you could always decide, okay, we have a particular rush at this particular time where we can make it 21 or even less if for some reason there's some sort of constraint that comes up. So that's why I'm just asking if, should we go with the 30 and knowing that we can always make it less, or should we just, If we make it 21, then it's always going to be 21.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's ultimately a decision for the MPO to decide and for this committee to make a recommendation about. I think staff's perspective on it and what I was hearing from the committee last year was that we're virtually always going to vote to make it 21 days anyhow. So why not just write that in as the standard? But certainly, the staff are to be guided on this by you.
Yeah, I think one of the additional reasons, so we wanted to move to a 21-day comment period, is to provide sort of some time for staff between the comment period closing and the next meeting, when they would normally be voting to endorse the project, to sort of process public comments and make sure that they're fully considered. I know a full month-long process, if it ends sort of the day before the MPO meeting, you're in this sort of scramble to make sure that we've got all the comments collected and incorporated and discussed, and that the commenters know that they can show up to that MPO meeting. Whereas with a 21-day, you have that time to incorporate any comments if you received them. And then there's that extra moment at the meeting to sort of discuss if anybody has any late comments. So I think that was sort of the rationale, is since that's the process for so many other documents, not just at Boston, but sort of across the state, to sort of move for a consistent 21-day.
So is this generally being done, in other MPOs across the country, and I guess it's being done across the state, but what is the status on that?
It's the standard for all MPO, UPWPs, and TIPs in Massachusetts. I'm not sure about across the state. I think the only exception to the 21 days at the MPO level in Massachusetts is the public participation plans, which have a regulatory requirement for a longer one.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is only as far as the UPWP goes, this is only for amendments. The full document would still require a full month of review.
Do you need a motion on this?
No, we do not.
Because this is Tom, because I have no problem with the 21 day. It would be good if we were consistent, on these things. And I do remember the conversation about staff, having enough time to process the comments so that we can get them on a timely basis. So I think, especially where it's just the amendments, I think, I'm fine with it.
And it looks like we have a comment from Daniel.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. I guess a comment or response to the 21 days and then a question. I don't really have any objection with the 21 days standard either, if it's brings us in sort of alignment with the other MPOs in the state. I certainly respect the need for staff to have time to address comments that do come in and prepare for the next meeting. I think we should be cognizant that there's the timeline or the time period for actually having, space for people to make comments, but it's also important to have, if the change affects a particular party or stakeholder, that they are informed at that time too. So I think it's, it's not just the amount of time, but it's also how, making sure that any stakeholders that are particularly important would receive, a notification or something that this opportunity is available. So I think that's important part of it. And I don't really see 21 days seems a fair amount of time, in my opinion. My question is, if I think you sort of passed over this, or you mentioned it, Sandy, at the beginning. So what I understand is that so there is a 10% threshold, and so now this is going to a 25% threshold for the FY22. I guess in part because the 10% threshold was a little too low.
That is my understanding. I mean, I all I know is what I have been presented with is this document. Ben gave us some context about why their FHWA is motivated to make this change. But that is essentially my understanding, is that the 10% threshold was too restrictive and was triggering too many amendments. It was placing quite a burden on FHWA and presumably on OTP as well to shepherd all of this through the process.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I just, yeah, I was a little confused about that, the 10 and then the 25, and seeing that it's not in the new language, but I think considering we didn't really have it didn't seem like we were really having a clear, before this, when we had talked about, things were just changing and there wasn't really any amendment or any clear process for that besides sort of the behind the scenes work. I think, I have no objection to the language here.
I want to say, Daniel, thank you also for the stress on notifying stakeholders. I think that's really important, and we can take consideration of writing that into both the UPWP and the public participation plan.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. I guess what I'm saying is there's the quality of the outreach is as important as sort of giving people enough time to make the comment. But I think 3 weeks seems pretty sufficient if you're getting up front with the people that really need to know, that would be the ones most affected. Thanks.
All right. Any other thoughts on the amendment modification procedures? Tom.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. So just to, Tom Bent mentioned it. So just remind me, what's our amendment for the tip? Are we on, we have 30 and 21 days, right? For the tip still, or did we change that? Here's my point. I don't have a problem with the 21 days. I think Steve Olenoff's point's a good point, but I think Sandy's counterpoint's a good point too. We're just not getting the feedback. It's like we're being informed by what's happened over the last 6 to 10 years. But I am curious. I think it's a good point about consistency with the feedback. Can anybody remember what we agreed to for the tip?
I believe the tip amendment process is 21 days for a tip amendment.
Because if that's the case, then I should know this. I sort of remember that in the debate that had it. If that's the case, then yeah, I'd say it seems like a reasonable proposal that you guys are putting forward. Thanks. That's my 2 cents worth on the 21 day stuff. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Tom. Right. Any other comments? Not seeing any. Sandy, did you get what you need?
I did, thank you. Yeah, and I just wanted to provide one additional bit of context I probably should have said at the beginning, which is that I think in my 4 years of doing the UPWP, we've received a total of 3 comments on UPWP amendments. So this is kind of it's important, right? We want to give people the right to comment, and the public does have the right to comment, but the volume of comments, shall we say, is pretty low here that we're talking about.
Great, thank you, Sandy. Oh, Lynn.
Oh, yeah, I hesitated to say anything, but I guess the deal is that if the trigger point is now 25%, then people might actually care more. But I understand where you're coming from with respect to needing time. And I guess the question is there ever really a level of urgency, meaning that you need to have the feedback on the amendment? Because if it takes you like another cycle of MPO meetings in order to then get the approval from the MPO, you'll be stymied in the work that you're trying to do. Because as Steve mentioned to me, for the volunteer groups that meet monthly, the 21 days is already too little time. And so you're just not, it's going to be hard for them to go through their regular process in order to give you the feedback. And to the extent that those groups represent people who aren't transportation experts generally or doing it day to day, it may represent groups that we are trying to reach out to. We are kind of making it hard for them to do it. So we just need to be aware of the fact that we have competing goals here, and just be honest with ourselves about the result of that and the likelihood that it'll make it harder for, groups, certain kinds of groups to participate. So I'm not going to stand in the way of this because I understand where you're coming from. But I guess just to get back to my question, would it be the case that if you had to go through another cycle, MPO meetings in order to accommodate a longer feedback time, you would be stymied?
I think in short, and I hear what you're saying, Len, definitely. The answer is yes. I mean, we went through this over the past summer with needing to get, we had a project that needed to be amended out of the UPWP, and then we had to replace it with a couple of things. And we ended up, I will say, I worked on both of the projects that ended up being amended in, and they were on very short timetables. So yeah, there is, the UPWP often we have plenty of time, but sometimes we do get to a crunch point where it is urgent to get something done as quickly as possible. And as you noted, right, if you miss a deadline, then it automatically extends out another 2 weeks.
Right.
Because or longer, because that's the cycle of MPO meetings.
Well, not only do I have to believe you and accept what you say, I remember that. So thank you for reminding me of that. And okay, let me answer the question. So thank you. Like I said, I understand. I'm going to vote for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. And I see a hand up from Tom Branham.
Hi, I think I do have to make a quick comment on the lack of comments, and the proposal seems just very reasonable. So why would there be much comment? But I do have one concern that, as we've seen in the last year or two, that there are events that can disrupt any schedule. So 3 weeks can be kind of short time frame at times for a turbulent era. That was it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. So I think we'll move forward to the next agenda item here. Let's see, pull my notes here. Agenda item number 5, coordination with other MPOs. So this is a question that came out of a previous meeting about how the Boston Region MPO and CTPS staff coordinate with other MPOs, neighboring MPOs, particularly with respect to sort of ensuring that transportation issues that cross MPO boundaries are not lost in the shuffle, or that neighboring MPOs' transportation issues are sort of acknowledged when necessary. So I guess I'll kick it off with the perspective from MassDOT. So we have a coordinating role across all the MPOs and sort of between the MPOs and the federal partners, FHWA and FTA particularly, created by our oversight of the federal funds. So, formally, all of the MPOs are contractors to MassDOT on these federal contracts. So the funds that are used to fund the UPWP studies, MassDOT's required to ensure that all the MPOs are following federal regulation. And we provide the local match for these funds. We have sort of an added incentive to sort of monitor how UPWP funding is being used across the state. And so my group in planning, the MPO activities group, we fulfill that coordinating role. So for example, I have oversight for the Boston region, the Old Colony region, which is Brockton and Plymouth, Southeastern Massachusetts region, which is the South Coast, and Taunton and Attleboro, and the Cape Cod region. So for all of these regions, I review all the 3C activities, so the TIP and the UPWP and the public participation plan, and the planning that happens under those. And then my colleagues sort of have other regions, and we all compare notes, sort of as information comes in, cross-boundary issues arise, that sort of thing. So in practice, that means every month and every quarter and every year we receive pretty detailed reports on what sort of MPO staff are up to, what their outreach has been, what meetings are going on, what issues are arising. And we also attend all of the MPO meetings, most of the Transportation Advisory Group meetings. Unfortunately, I don't have the calendar time to attend RTAC as well. It conflicts with another Transportation Advisory Group down in Southeast Mass. And so we're sort of participating in a lot of these meetings so we can see these issues as they arise. So we flag them, share them with our colleagues. You know, if something comes up in Lowell, I know I can call Derek Schuster, who's my counterpart for the northeast portion of the state. And when we see some of these cross-regional needs, you know, sometimes they require MassDOT attention, so I'll bring them to, you know, other entities within MassDOT, or I'll kick off a study of my own if it's something that crosses boundaries and the MPOs aren't necessarily the right location for that study. So for example, I'm managing the Cape Rail study right now, which crosses through multiple MPOs and impacts multiple MPOs, and there wasn't a single MPO that kind of made sense to house that study. So we took that on at the MassDOT level. And sometimes those needs arise at the regional level. So for example, in the priority corridors that Boston MPO does, there's a lot of them that connect with RTAs that are outside the Boston region or with important corridors and in neighboring MPOs. And so we participate in those processes so that we can flag those items. I think the other thing we do is we sort of help share best practices between the regions. So we have, for example, we have a virtual public involvement committee was initially internal, and we've invited all the MPOs to send staff. Kate White at the Boston MPO has been participating in that for a while now, and it's been very helpful. And I think out of that, an example is the slide deck that we use for the MPO meetings. That's partially inspired by the Cape Cod MPO, which put together a very robust resource at the beginning of the pandemic that we were able to share with the other MPOs. So from MassDOT's perspective, most of the cross MPO coordination issues, particularly with respect to planning, go through myself and my colleagues, the Derricks and Brian Pounds in the MPO activities group. And you can always, you know, email me directly or reach out to me if you have a question. I'm sort of open to the public, MPO staff, board members, anyone who has any sort of cross-regional issues can always reach out to me. But the MPOs and Boston in particular do a lot of coordination between themselves as well, sort of independent of MassDOT, through their TMG meetings, the UZA coordination, MARPA. So I'll let Jonathan speak to those because he's a little closer to the pulse on those types of work.
Sure, thank you, Ben. So as Ben mentioned, we do a lot of coordination with our neighboring MPOs. We particularly have each of them, because we have the Boston urbanized area, we have a MOU, which most of the members of the MPO know, that signed in 2018, which allows us to coordinate and provide data and cross-reference things with our neighboring MPOs within the MPO region, within the UZA boundary, that is, I'm sorry. We also have reciprocal agreements where part of our region goes into another UZA area, for example, the Worcester region. So we have a reciprocal agreement coordinating UZA with Central Mass Regional Planning Commission for the Central Mass MPO. We also have them with other MPOs down to the south. So we have those which allow us and provide guidance with the federal guidance to make sure that we're doing all of that. We meet monthly as a group of transportation managers. All the managers of the transportation divisions of the MPO, of the regional planning associations, meet monthly the first Tuesday of the month to coordinate any and all pieces. We talk about everything from funding formulas to data sharing to work that's going on in the region, cross-border work, coordination of federal and state guidance. And as Ben mentioned, there's a lot of coordination effort where we get a lot of guidance at one time where Federal Highway, Federal Transit, and Mass DOT will come and talk about various items that affect all of the MPOs in the state, and that we're all consistent in our reporting and such. And then finally, we have the Mass Association of RPAs, which is the group that puts together a lot of the formula voting and votes in, and all of the was presented with all of the funding for TIP, UPWP, and stuff each year. They meet monthly as well, and they provide us with guidance. So between all of that coordination at the local level, at the regional level, we are able to maintain our status as need be and go from there. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jonathan. So I guess I just wanted to open up the floor if anyone had any sort of more specific questions or wanted to go into any detail on cross MPO coordination. Lynn?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I mean, I appreciate all this explanation. It's informative, and I don't want to say I'm reassured because I was always confident that you all were doing a good job along these lines, but it's good to have some more detail about it. So I appreciate that. I myself, and I'll take this on myself and look around websites for information, because I'm kind of curious about their UPWPs, because as you know, I really like the research part, and so and
Oh, it looks like you muted yourself by accident, Lynn.
sorry, yeah, I think I wasn't even touching anything. I had an unstable internet thing, so that's odd. That's really odd. Anyways, so with respect to our current or any current year's UPWP, it'd be handy for me, and like I said, I'll take this on myself to get a sense of what other things are out there, because we get ideas, and the reason I'll take that on is because I could broaden that scope as much as I wanted, and it's not your responsibility, to go as far out looking at what other people are doing as my curiosity may take me. And anyways, I appreciate you making this a part of the agenda and giving us information.
Sure, thanks, Lynn. Yeah, and I will add that since all the UPWPs, like the tips, are developed sort of at the same time across the state, some of the MPOs developed those a little later, but the Boston MPO and several of the others have theirs sort of released on a similar schedule. Because of that, we're sort of looking at them all at once from my office, at least. So we are sort of noting some of these efforts, and that is incorporated from our perspective into our annual guidance. Sometimes I know for this most recent round, a lot of the regions have been expressing a desire to do something similar to the Community Connections program, and that's something that we've been supportive of. But we also want to make sure that they're putting in all the planning work necessary, because a lot of them don't have the staff that the Boston MPO has, and so they have sort of fewer people paying attention to it. And so we're trying to make sure that they include, the work in the UPWP in order to develop those programs, for example. So we were able to, in our guidance this year, link to the application program from the Community Connections program and share that with a lot of the MPOs that were interested so that they could sort of crib notes. And similarly, I think when people do a lot of resilience work, a lot of people look to the Cape Cod MPO, which has done sort of significant work on their end through the Cape Cod Commission. And so there's a lot of notes that can be cribbed from there and incorporated into other coastal MPOs. Mark?
Great, thank you.
Mark, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I did. I just wanted to add that occasionally some of our UPWP studies that we do have to coordinate with some of our neighbors. We've coordinated in the past with Serped down in Foxborough, where our region ends right at Foxborough, but the main roadway, 140, is a significant roadway that we share with Serped. So we do coordination with them, and then possibly next year we're looking at a corridor that we might study where we want to go into Old Colony to include a portion of an intersection that is vital for a corridor that we want to look at as well. So we do coordinate in our studies as well.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Yeah, I think something I'll add is that this came up when we were putting together our Providence urbanized area MOU. So the MPO voted on that this spring. So that was something that was sort of across multiple MPOs. But one of the things that came up is when we're looking at sort of a state map, Rhode Island's usually not on the map. And so it's easy to forget that Providence is right there. So you can throw a rock at it from Fall River and hit it. So it's important to be reminded occasionally about our neighbors. I know MPOs have something similar. They all have their MPO boundaries and all the certification documents. And it's easy to forget that you can cross a couple towns over and you're in Brockton or Lawrence or Lowell or Worcester. And so it is good to sort of keep reminding ourselves that, these other cities are, even if they're not part of the Boston MPO region, they're still sort of part of our region in a broader sense. Any other comments or questions on MPO coordination? All right, not seeing any, so I think we can move on to the next agenda item. Agenda item 6. So this is discussion of the UPWP Preuniverse. So I do want to note that this is a little different from previous years. So this is a list of potential projects, and it's essentially kind of a loose summary of all the proposed or identified studies from the public process, from internal processes, from our partners. So normally the first list we'd see would be sort of a vetted list of proposed studies by staff group with their relationships to the long range plan goals and sort of a budget attached so that we can start thinking about prioritizing them. But we wanted to get this sort of in front of people a little earlier so that we could discuss some of the meat of the studies before we dug into the sort of prioritization discussion. So this is purely an informational discussion since we haven't identified those relationships to the long range plan yet. And we haven't sort of set aside the budget for these tasks yet. But hopefully this discussion can help Sandy in managing his process for making those connections. So at a future meeting, we can have a more detailed discussion. So Sandy, I don't know if you wanted to add more.
Yeah, sure. So this is a document that I emailed out to committee members. Let me know if for some reason you didn't receive it. Basically, as Ben said, this is not the time to start making priority decisions. We haven't made the document public yet, and it's really just for your informational consumption at this point. There's no guarantee that all of these will be on the final universe because we haven't vetted them fully yet to make sure they're not redundant or that they're actually within our capabilities. So you can expect to see that at the next committee meeting. But for now, I just wanted to take a few minutes, and I recognize that we said this meeting would go until 9:45, and it's now 9:39, to see if you had any factual questions about this that I or any of the other staff present can answer. But mainly, I wanted to make sure I got this into your hands at this point in the process so that you can review it, ask any questions now, or you can email me later. And also just so that you can brainstorm a little bit. And if there's any connections you see between the concepts, anything that jumps out at you as saying this is a good idea, a bad idea, inspires new thinking, that you can let me know. I'm going to be meeting with staff over the next couple of weeks to develop that final universe. So really any questions or ideas you have, feel free to throw out there now or by email later.
Thanks, Sandy. So any immediate questions or comments or discussion points from the list that Sandy emailed out? Lynn?
Well, I just want to express appreciation for this. This is wonderful. I read it fairly quickly, and I'm looking forward to reading it more in depth. There were certainly some things in there that popped out to me that are very appealing. I'm not going to talk about them now, mainly for interest of time, but also in understanding that this is preliminary, and so I don't really have any questions. I just look forward to the next step, but I really, really appreciate you all giving this to me, because it's always the kind of thing that I'm curious about, and so now I get to see it, and now I realize that my curiosity was worth it. So thank you.
Thanks, Len. Any other comments or questions on the pre-universe? We'll come up with a better name, I think, next year.
Open to ideas. At one point I think I called it the Big Bang. Pre-universe Big Bang. And
there you go.
That's a little bit too jokey, though.
All right. So seeing and hearing no other discussions here.
I'm just, I think I'd have to go back in time, but Well, I just thought about something with, no, never mind. I'm gonna have to, I'll follow up. I'll follow up. I'm not quite sure what my question is. Part of it is, I know that there was some MBTA stuff that, like the Central Core and stuff like that, that there were people who were interested in studying it, but it was sort of put off because of the timing and because of other MassDOT efforts. And, when I looked this over, I wasn't thinking of it in that lens. So I don't want to take the time right now, but I'll go back and refresh my memory about what those issues were. And just to refresh my memory about where we're at. Thanks for that. It's sort of I'm thinking out loud there. I won't take the groups any more time for that.
Well, you know where to find me, Tom, if you have anything you want
I do, Sandy. Yeah, no, I do. It just stream of thought. I should have thought about it beforehand, but but yeah, no, it looks like a detailed group. I sort of echo what Len's saying. Some good information here. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Sandy.
Yeah, thanks, Tom. Daniel?
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for this list. I mean, a lot of really interesting different things on here. Obviously, we can't do all of them. I just want to say I'm glad that congestion pricing is on here. I think many people were disappointed that that was taken out of the bond bill. I think that was something that was vetoed out of the bond bill. It seems like it's coming up every year, and I hope that I don't know, it seems like there needs to be something. It needs to be studied, for us to really think clearly about it. So I hope it gets a fair shake, or some other way that it gets advanced. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Anyone else with comments on the Preuniverse? Seeing none, I will add, if you didn't click over to the second tab, that's a fun read as well. It's not the list of proposed studies, but it's a lot of the public input that was received. And I think that there's a lot of good detail in there. Some of it might be aimed more towards municipalities and aimed more towards MassDOT. So there's a lot of breadth in there. All right, so I guess I'll move on to the next agenda item. Number 7, are there any board members who have any other information you'd like to share with the UPWP committee? Seeing and hearing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, our next meeting. So our next meeting will be looking at sort of the gussied up final version of the UPWP universe. So there'll be some additional work done to sort of vet these, identify their connections to the long-range plan, identify feasibility, staff interest and availability, and that sort of thing. So I believe it's scheduled for March 25th. Is that correct, Sandy?
That is the staff suggestion. We could do the 18th since we're planning to have MPO meetings both days, but our suggestion is to do the 25th.
Right. I mean, I'm fine with that if everyone else is. I think that provides enough time for this list to be filtered properly. So I guess I'll see everyone on the 25th, barring any objection on that. Is there a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting?
Motion to adjourn. Len.
I'll second.
Thanks, Tom. All right, all in favor, then meeting adjourned. See you in 15.